You're listening to the Diet Rebel podcast with Kiki Smith. If you're a woman who hates the idea of having to choose between loving your body and changing it, then you are a diet rebel and this podcast is for you. In this podcast, we talk about everything from loving your body exactly as it is now to becoming the most fit, lean, and toned you've ever been, no matter how old you are, how many tiny humans you've birthed, or how many times you've lost and regained the same 15 or 50 pounds. Seriously, you don't want to miss it. So grab a snack, preferably protein-based, and sit back and enjoy this episode.
Hey, okay, so I'm going to dive in because this is a topic that I am actually super excited about because DIYers, I love you. I am one of you. So I completely understand you and where you're coming from. And that's why I'm just really going to speak to you from the heart today about this. I'm going to give you 5 common pitfalls that really get in the way of DIYers like us. Like I say, I am a DIYer. I love figuring out things and seeing things that I could do, discovering that I could do things that maybe I didn't know that I could do. I love researching and diving into things and coming up with all these new findings by myself. So if you're a DIYer, like I said, I get you and I'm one of you. But we are not without our flaws. So that is something that I really want to talk about with you guys today is just like, what are some of the downsides and what are some of the things that you should be very careful about in your journey? You know, when you are attempting to DIY this, you have to be 100% aware of the things that I'm going to cover today, because if you're not aware, they're either going to catch you off guard or you're not even going to realize that it's happening in the background and you're going to get further and further away from your goals. And really, that's the entire point of this, is because I am a DIYer and I want to support you in this way. I want you to actually get results from the things that you're doing. I want you to get results from DIYing. If you're somebody who has decided that you're going to, like, whether it's to save money, whether it's because you're trying to become a personal trainer, whether it's because, you know, you don't think that it's that big of a deal, like, I don't really care about my results. You know what I mean? So like, there's different reasons why we DIY. I posted a poll the other day asking you why you DIY, but I really want to get to the heart of some of the things that you would have to avoid if you're planning on DIYing. So these, if you have never heard me teach before, then you're going to be in for a treat. I don't know, maybe not. But you are going to notice that everything starts with a D. That is how I do. I do a lot of like alliteration, I guess that's called, when you have everything starts with D, because I want you to be able to remember it, you know, in case you're not taking notes and not writing this down. I want you to be able to remember these after the fact. And for those of you guys who are new to me, if you don't know who I am, my name is Kiki Smith. I am the founder of the Eat More to Weigh Less method. I'm creator of Crush the Diet, a coaching experience that we have that actually helps you to dissect the lies that keep you stuck so that you can step fully into the things that you actually want to do in life. So we help people go from being discouraged DIY dieters to crushing their life, really. So any goals that you have in life, it applies to you. Getting started with the actual pitfalls. So I'm going to go over some of these, and if you happen to find yourself in any of them, let me know. But the first big mistake that a lot of DIY dieters make is dabbling. Having one foot in the door and one foot out of the door, you know, basically like always researching, looking for a faster way, never fully committing to the current thing. And I have to say up front, like, you will never dabble your way to success, like ever. So if you are waiting for the results to prove themselves to you before you actually take the actions required for whatever your goal is, that's not going to happen. But that's the way that a lot of us as DIYers approach it, is we kind of say like, I'm going to do this and kind of see what happens, you know? And so when we're trying to just see what happens, then we're just being observers. We're not actually taking actions toward the goal. And in order to actually see the results, you would have to take actions toward the goal. So you're not taking the actions to kind of see, like, try something once or twice and see where it takes you. You're actually going all in. So if you're always focusing on, like, this, the way this showed up in my life was just that I was always focusing on a phase that I wasn't in, and then being upset about not having those results rather than focusing on how the current phase that I'm in would play into or assist me in achieving the results when I do get to that phase, because your results are going to compound and you're not going to get all of your results from one phase, but each phase kind of feeds off of the next. So if you're somebody that is, like, say, for instance, with Eat More to Weigh Less, if you're in a phase where you're trying to build muscle or you're doing a metabolic reset or something like that, but you're focused on whether or not the scale is moving down, which is not a part of that phase, then you're just dabbling in the current phase that you're in. You're not all in. The only way that you can be all in is if you're like, okay, the whole reason I'm in this phase is because I want to build muscle so that when I go to lose fat again, it's a bit of an easier process for me. If you don't go all in that area, then you're not going to be able to get the benefits in another area. So this is no different than in your life. If you're trying to save money, for instance, like, instead of when you're in the saving money phase being upset that you don't have money for the thing that you're trying to get, remember that that's the whole point of the money saving phase, is that you're saving so that you can buy the thing or go on the trip or whatever it is once you have enough money. So spend more time going all in that area so that you can achieve the goal. So dabbling is something that happens a lot for DIY dieters. And what I have on here is we dabble until we're discouraged. Like, we get so upset about what's not happening instead of putting our energy into the phase that we're in, into the behaviors that we're supposed to be doing, into the strategy that actually is going to help us, that, we never officially either burn the bridge to our old ways of doing things. So that's kind of always like in our head, in the back of our head, like, even if it's the very thing that led us to needing the new way, we're always seeing we're always seeing that as an option, like an out, whenever that doubt or discomfort sets in. So then we do this back and forth dance until we're so discouraged and thinking like nothing is ever going to work for me. So that's why I say that we can dabble our way to discouragement. So if you're feeling discouraged, that is one of the first questions that I would ask is, have you been dabbling? And if you have, then how can you turn that around? And the rest of the tips that I'm going to talk about all tend to lead you back into the dabbling phase. So that's the reason why I wanted to talk about that one first, because I know a lot of DIY dieters are very discouraged in their journey. And the reason why they're discouraged is because they're just kind of all over the place. They're not really focused on the things that they're supposed to be doing in that particular phase. They're not really focused on getting the benefits of that phase. They're not really focused on why they're even doing something. So you want to make sure that that is not you. So the next one I would say is dissecting your data prematurely. This one is huge for DIY dieters. And the reason is because most DIYers, don't typically fully understand the difference between correlation and causation. So they don't really know how to read or assess data without forming an identity or some type of false assumption about themselves from it. So they tend to attach unnecessary meaning and identity to things that are happening to them when they should just be receiving it as data. So by data, I mean the scale, how much you weigh, or the amount of carbs or points or calories or macros or whatever that you've eaten. We tend to internalize those things and then we create our own assumption from it. We start kind of jumping to massive conclusions. So we might say I ate a lot of carbs and I was bloated, or maybe that's what happened. You ate a lot of carbs and you were bloated, but in our head that can turn into, I must be gluten intolerant, or, I can't eat carbs if I want to lose weight, or, if you ate maybe a low carb diet, or you, whatever, did Weight Watchers and lost weight before, whatever method that you use of losing weight, this is the reason why a lot of us don't burn the bridge and we keep dabbling, because we connect that to I did this and I lost weight. So therefore it's the only thing that worked for me. And a lot of times it's the only thing that worked for you because you don't go all in on other things, because you're still kind of attached to that, or you haven't burned the bridge. You're still looking at that as a way out instead of really dissecting it and understanding, how was that diet compared to what you were doing before? Was it just lower in calories overall? Was it higher in protein? Like, did you do a workout plan that maybe you weren't doing anything and then you started working out? So how is whatever that was compared to what you were doing before? So if you do a very low carb diet and then you come off of that and you start eating carbs, yes, you're going to notice some water retention. That is not a conclusive evidence towards the fact that I see that I shouldn't have carbs. Or maybe you do a elimination diet, you start eliminating like gluten, dairy, things like that, and to see if it solves one problem. And maybe it doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but when you go to add those things back in, you get a reaction to it. And so you conclude from that reaction, I knew I shouldn't have this thing. And really, it's just that you removed it from your body for a while, so it became kind of foreign. And that's just what happens when you remove things and then you reintroduce them. That can lead you to the excessive, extreme, and incorrect conclusion jumping. So you start deciding that something is too hard, or it's not working, or that you're a special snowflake. Like, by special snowflake, I mean like, oh, because I'm menopausal, or because now I'm in my 30s, or because now I'm in my 50s, or because I have 6 kids, or I've always been the overweight girl, whatever this reason that is outside of your control that's causing you to need to keep looking for something better, aka more dabbling. So a lot of times that is how that slippery slope happens, is that because we're still thinking with that old mindset, even when we execute new behaviors, we're still applying the old mindset to it. And so we're like, oh, well, this isn't happening as fast as that was, so therefore it's wrong. Or I just had this reaction, therefore I should never have that thing again. Whatever it is, if you're jumping to these huge and incorrect conclusions and believing that they are 100% accurate for you, that's going to give you an excuse to never really show up and put in the work and the time that it is going to take for you to get what you want. Therefore, you never actually get it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So again, these are all mistakes that I have made. So like, I'm not just coming here to judge you. I'm coming here saying like, these were harsh realities for me to deal with, like realizing that no, I'm not that special and it's not my endometriosis. I'm just really not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Or I'm not that special and it's not because, I'm the only one in the family who's like short and grows out instead of up. That's the reason, you know what I mean? Like that my genetic, tendencies are one way versus, other people in my family or other friends. And so because of that, I would always put the answer outside of me instead of executing on what I could. So therefore, I'm just going to keep getting the results for the very thing that I'm telling myself. So that's why it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, see, I knew that I couldn't lose weight without cardio. See, I knew that I couldn't eat carbs and lose weight. See, I knew that I need to eat 1,200 calories, or whatever it is. And maybe it's not even like you don't even find the thing, because putting yourself in the special snowflake category allows you to keep searching for the thing. And then you don't really have to find it. Then you're like, I know for me, there was almost more comfort in not having an answer than in having one. Because in having an answer, that means I need to actually execute on it. In not having an answer, that got to be my excuse. It got to be like, I don't know what's wrong with me. The doctors can't figure anything out. I just keep trying this and trying that. And I read this and I Googled that. And it allowed me to stay on this wild goose chase, not realizing that like, that's my natural tendency. My natural tendency as an extrovert DIYer, like I want to lurk in the shadows. I want to not say the things that I want. I want to try to figure everything out on my own and not ask for help. So it actually was more soothing to me to be able to have that to fall back on, just be like, maybe it's just not for me. And maybe I'm just not one of those people that can do those things. So that's one of the things that I just, I want to call you out on if you're one of those people that are doing it. Like I said, DIYers, I love you. Most of us are the introverts. Most of us are the ones that want to keep to ourselves And not saying that extroverts can't be DIYers either, but just saying we start using a lot of those personality traits to pull us away from actually doing what it takes. So if you're falling into that and you're dissecting the information prematurely or incorrectly, then know that that is going to be a very slippery slope for you. So the next one would be detachment from your current lifestyle. And let me explain a little bit more about what that means. When we detach or disconnect from reality, which is very common if you're DIYing, right? Like this happens to anybody really. Like a lot of times, even when people go and they like hire a coach or a trainer or whatever it is for their thing that they're trying to do. When it comes to dieting, we tend to want to compartmentalize the weight loss journey. And when DIY dieters start compartmentalizing their journey, that makes it nearly impossible to actually ever stick with it. So what I mean by this is like when you compartmentalize, that's when you're more likely to like, that's saying, hey, I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year. Well, if you're losing a pound, let's say even a week, that's 50 weeks of your life. If you're trying to lose 50 pounds, or, if you're losing it slower than that, it could be up to a year. So that's the type of stuff that you want to take into consideration. When you just think about that, like in its own little area and not think about all the other stuff in your life that's also going to be going on, because life doesn't stop once we set a fat loss goal or whatever it is. When we start to compartmentalize like that, when we think like, okay, once I lose the weight, then I'll do this thing, or I'm just going to focus on this, we keep setting the weight loss goals and then we're not thinking about how our actual lifestyle is. When we start doing that, that's when we're more likely to allow overhaul mentality to sink in. So it becomes completely reasonable to you to think that you're going to suddenly remove 13 things from your diet, eat 100% like organic or raw or paleo, keto, vegan, whatever, that you're going to start a 6-day-a-week exercise routine and get 12 hours of sleep a night. Like that might not be realistic. Like if you don't have a job or kids or a spouse or friends or a life or taste buds, maybe that works for you. But I'm willing to bet that at least one of those is not true. You at least have taste buds, right? Like, so if you're not taking that into consideration and you're going to look at that and be like, wow, it helped that person to look like that, I'm going to do that. And not think about the fact that like pretty much anything that you're doing, you need to be willing to do for a long period of time. So if you're starting that thing and it doesn't even resemble anything about your current life, it takes a whole lot of prep work to make the foods. The foods are bland. It's removing foods that you love, things like that. Like if you're not taking that stuff into consideration, then it's already not realistic. But because we think that something's going to be short-term, we're like, oh, I can do it for this short-term period. But like you have to have nothing else in your life going on for that short-term period in order to truly give your all to that. So that starts the overhaul mentality thinking, like I'm going to completely overhaul my life. And most of the time, you're not going to be able to overhaul your life for long, because guess what? The real life starts kicking back in and, you got stuff to do. So again, think about it long term. If you realistically have a year's worth of weight to lose, can you actually afford to spend only like all your time that year focused only on that? Do you have time to put everything else to the side? Probably not. So understand that your physique goals cannot be created in a vacuum. So it's like saying like it can't be made separate from your life goals, your priorities, your preferences. If you're dieting to a really high stress time, that can backfire on you. Not only because typically you'll either like stress eat and then blow the whole thing, or maybe you'll stress gain because stress increases your cortisol, causes you to retain more water. So like everything's feeling like it's going backwards for you. Or like I said, you just won't be able to keep to it. And if you're not incorporating the times of the year, like in order to do that, in order to incorporate times of the year when you're naturally more busy or more inclined to be more or less active, into your physique goals, that requires planning precision that most DIYers ain't got time for. So, they're either you don't understand the amount of planning that goes into it, or even if someone was to tell you, which I tell people all the time, I'm like, okay, here's the things that you need to take in consideration. It seems tedious to actually go through it on your own. Most DIY dieters are like, just give me the plan, I'll work it, it'll be fine. But taking the time out to reflect and do those things is super, super important to actually having success with it. Because if you're just picking a random diet or exercise plan off the internet, bookshelf, magazine rack, IG feed, whatever, with zero regards to your current life, not the imaginary unicorn version of your life where you have unlimited time to dedicate to dieting, that is a red flag. Whatever strategy you're getting, that means you're going to execute on these behaviors and it's going to give you this certain result. You're setting yourself up for failure by starting off with a strategy that you can't keep up or that doesn't actually apply to you. Therefore, you can't keep it up. So detaching from your current lifestyle is huge. Now, that also means understanding that your current lifestyle isn't your lifestyle forever. So that means that during certain periods of life, you may be able to incorporate things that you weren't able to incorporate in other periods of life. If you're a mom with multiple kids and you're cooking all the meals and you just want to have like these enjoyable meals with your family and cook their favorite things, maybe during that time, that's not really the time to try to like add on these other super stressful elements or, eat 100% organic, clean, whatever, because maybe that doesn't fit for your budget. But one day the kids are going to be gone and out of the house. And then maybe now you can actually extend this budget to have more of the organic things that you couldn't afford before or whatever it is, not just organic, but just to understand that like your phases of life will always change and you can change with them. You can change your goals with them. You can change the way that you execute your strategy with them. That's why understanding, the planning process and the strategy creating process is so important, because once you know how to do it, you can keep reevaluating. So like with my clients, I have them reevaluate every 90 days because stuff changes fast. You know what I mean? So between one 90-day round and another, the kids may have been out of school. A kid may have graduated. You may have, quit your job and become a stay-at-home mom. You may have gone from a stay-at-home mom to work. You may have gotten a raise at work. You may be traveling more for work this quarter. There's so many things to take into consideration that if you don't have the strategy for each 90-day round and know how to okay, let me reflect really quick on what just happened so that I can create this plan for me to implement, then you're just going to grab random strategies and get random results at best, or no results, honestly, which is what happens to a lot of people. So number one was dabbling yourself into discouragement. Number two was dissecting the data prematurely, like taking a look at things and jump into conclusions, come into assumptions way too early when maybe you don't actually know what they mean. Detachment from your current reality, again, was the one that we just talked about, where you're not taking into consideration things that are happening in your actual life when you're picking your random strategy. So these are all the things that we're talking about that DIY dieters tend to do, and it's very common. So if I go through this whole list and you're like, I never did any of those, you're lying to yourself because I did all of them. So it's very, very important that you really, really take some time to consider if you've done any of these. So the fourth one, downplaying or denying your actual goals. This one is a gut check for me, and I'm sure for somebody it probably will be too when you realize that you may have done this. So what I mean by downplaying is downplaying the real goal or denying the real goal. So this can mean that maybe you're being too vague about what you want, or you're flat out denying what you actually want. Now, most of us probably wouldn't think that we're denying what we want, but for years of me working really closely with weight loss clients who usually come to me as like, a last resort. They've already fully convinced themselves and nothing will ever work for them, which is like, yay for me, right? Like, that's so fun to work with somebody who doesn't think anything's possible. But once we start working together, we always their things start to reveal there's a much deeper level to their weight loss dilemma than just nothing ever works for me. So the second that I start setting goals, like going through the actual goal setting process with clients, the layers start shedding. And what I see across the board is that many people don't know, in quotation marks, because sometimes they do know, but they won't admit what they actually want. So, and this is even like to themselves, like they don't even want to say it out loud. There are so many, I cannot tell you how many client calls that I have been on where a person says something followed by the words, that's the first time I've ever said that out loud, even to myself. So like I said, this is a gut check, because as a DIYer, we're going to be more prone to do this because there's not somebody probing you, like asking you those deeper level questions. So you got to be willing to do it for yourself or get somebody that's going to do that for you. So a lot of people won't admit that they want something because they don't want to be held accountable for, and we don't want to be like embarrassed when we don't hit it. So a lot of times it's much easier to stay like really vague in what we're saying, like, oh, I just want to get more fit, or, you know, I just want to be healthy. Like, how can somebody hold you accountable to that? Because what does that even mean? So we say things like healthy or fit or something like that and not really get descriptive with it. If, you know, no one, first of all, the accountability thing, if no one knows what you want, then there's no accountability for you to hit it. Hence why that's the biggest downfall of a 100% DIY journey, is not having anyone there to hold you accountable to the things that, you know, you want or say you want, because they don't even know how. Like if the goal is vague, even with accountability, then the same thing. No one's gonna be able to hold you accountable to being more fit. So like I said, so you either have the person that's being really vague with it, you know, they're saying like, oh, this is just kind of what I want. So, you know, they're downplaying it, or you have the people that don't actually want what they say they want. Now, this is a huge thing that happens when I'm working with a client, is like, we discover that they actually want something more, or they want something completely different, but they're afraid to admit the actual thing that they want. So they use the more socially acceptable goal, which is to lose weight, as a crutch from actually going after the things that they want. So neither one of those reasons, like either saying that you want something that you don't, or being really vague, like, oh, I kind of sort of want this, you know, like none of those are going to have a strong enough why to pull you through when the times get tough and you want to quit, because the times will get tough and you will want to quit, even something that you actually 100% wholeheartedly want. So just imagine how easy it is to slack off on something that you don't want, you know, or something that you're only picking because somebody else wants it for you. So saying that, you know, I just want to be fit, when you actually want to go from a size 26 to a size 6, is denying your goal. Focusing on weight loss when you actually want to quit your job and travel the world is downplaying your goal. Neither one of those is actually going to serve you, because either way, precious time is being wasted on executing the wrong strategy for your actual goals. So you're going to continue to feel stuck because you're not making progress in either direction, because the thing that you don't really want, you do half-heartedly, or you dabble in, because you're just kind of like, I mean, if it happens, that'd be kind of cool, but you don't really want it. You have higher priorities and bigger things that you want, but you're just like, I mean, well, maybe if I was skinnier, that would work better for me. Or because society is telling you that you want to, whatever, be smaller or be muscular or do CrossFit or run a marathon or whatever it is, like you're setting these goals that don't really like have that pull for you. So best case scenario, you hit a goal that you don't care about and still feel empty, even if other people around you, you know, are happy about it, you know. Or worst case scenario, you know, you don't accomplish the fake goal or the real one, and you live your life with that like overwhelming sense of like failure and overwhelm and anxiety and depression and apathy, just like you just can't get a grip on your life, and you're just like, and you don't want to do anything. So if you really want something, like, own it. Because in today's day and age of love yourself where you are, which I'm a huge proponent of, if you've never listened to me before, you know that, like, I'm all about self-love, body positivity, loving yourself right now where you are. But I'm not about somebody saying, like, oh yeah, I love my cellulite, like, out loud to other people, when deep down inside they're like cringing and they're like really actually wishing that they were smaller. So yes, should you love yourself? Absolutely. Is it okay to want improvement? Whatever, whether it's your body, your house, your kids, your marriage, it's okay to love and be completely 100% grateful for something, but also be like, I would actually like this thing to change. I would like, more romance in my marriage. Like, that's okay for you to say. That doesn't mean that you hate your husband or that you want a divorce. It just means that this is what you want. You can say, like, like, I would like to, whatever, like I said, be a size, whatever, 10, 12, whatever it is for you, and say that instead of saying goals that are more acceptable to other people. Because setting goals that are acceptable to other people, setting goals that, are trendy right now, doesn't mean anything to you. And also not admitting that you want something because of parental pressure or peer pressure, or, like, pressure from even sometimes like people in your like spiritual network. Like, if you're somebody who feels like, like, oh man, wanting weight loss is like vain, and it means that, like, I don't like love and appreciate what I have, that doesn't necessarily mean that. And if it doesn't mean that to you, if you don't want something else too, and you don't admit that to yourself, then you're going to struggle with that. Because what you want internally and what you're saying externally are two different things, and you cannot separate biology from psychology. You're not going to be able to, like, a lot of my clients, they will come to me and they will say, like, I just want to be healthy. And the first thing that I'll say to them is that, okay, because I'll have people rank. I have them rank, like, okay, on a scale of, like 1 to 5, I give them 5 goals, like, of being like sports specific, fat loss, weight gain, whatever, I give them 5 things, and I say, okay, out of these, which ones, like, are number 1 and which one's number 5? And a lot of people are really scared to put fat loss as number 1, because they're working with me and they know that I'm like saying, like, love yourself or whatever, so they're scared to say it. But a lot of people will put health as number 1, and I'm all about being healthier. But I will ask them, so if that is your number 1 priority, if you go into the doctor now and 30, 60, 90 days from now, and all of your health markers have 100% completely improved, and you don't have any health issues anymore, but you are the exact same size or larger, are you okay with that? And then I sit and wait, because a lot of people will first say yes, and then I'll be like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Because a lot of us don't want to admit that. So some of us, are so stuck on getting smaller that we're not loving where we are. And some of us are so busy loving where we are that we're denying the fact that we want to be smaller. Only you know which side of that spectrum that you're on. And typically, whichever side you're on, that's the side that you need to kind of like tilt things to. So if you're the person that's like shaming yourself smaller, or you just look in the mirror every day and you're just like, oh my gosh, I hate my body, I hate my body, I hate my body, I hate my body. No, you probably need to work a little bit more on loving your body, but you can still have these habits in place to get smaller, because they will work a lot better if you're mentally in a better space. But if you're the person that's every day just like, oh, this is amazing and I love being healthy and yay, but you're not satisfied with the other things, but you're scared to actually set the goal, just like I said earlier, that's going to take you right back to dabbling. And when you're dabbling, you're 1 foot in, you're 1 foot out, you're not going all in, you're not showing up and doing the work. If you want a goal, you're going to have to show up and do the work. That means that when it gets tough and you want to quit, you got to keep showing up and doing the work. But if you're dabbling, or if you're trying to convince yourself that you don't want it, which we're all going to get to that point in a journey where we decide I want something. You start doing these things to get to it. You're going to hit a bump in the road, a sticking point where you're going to be like, do I really want this? And at that point in time, you got to be okay with either saying no and letting it go. That means not saying no and being like, I should be somewhere else by now. No, you let it go. You decided you didn't want it. Or saying like, yes, I still want it. And then you're going to keep moving in those behaviors, even when you're frustrated, even when you're having a bad day, even when it feels like nothing happened. So hopefully that, like, I know I'm kind of harping on that a little bit, but I am all about goals and crushing them. Like, there's nothing that I want more for you to crush your goals. And I love helping people to crush their goals. But if you downplay or don't admit your goal, I see, Toya, you're saying that, like, if that is you, then guess what? You're going to go year after year after year after year, not you personally, Toya, but, you know, of just like, watching other people that are like way less deserving than you, let's be real, hit those goals, you know, or you're going to, if you're not even admitting that you want them, you're just going to kind of always feel like, I feel like I should be further along by now. Or I just feel like you're just going to, there's going to be that discomfort of not moving forward. And eventually you're going to get to a point where like that pain of pushing through and that pain of staying the same starts to switch. And that's why for a lot of people, that's when it's like, okay, let's go. And that's when they will bring in accountability to it. So like, yeah, like you don't want to, you kind of get past that of like, I'd rather look stupid and leave it all on the court than to keep saying, I don't want it. And then like, not really executing the behaviors that get it. Like, how will you ever know what you can accomplish if you're not willing to look stupid? I mean, like, and I say that with love. I'm harping on it because it's me. It describes me. There's so many things that I have put off in my life because I was afraid of saying out loud that I wanted it. I was afraid of people even seeing me work towards it. So I would like kind of work toward it in secret. And then sometimes like people, like if I was around people, I would downplay that, or I wouldn't be executing those behaviors because those people are around. And because I wasn't that yet, I didn't want to be seen doing it. I only wanted to be seen executing the behaviors once I was already a success in that thing. And that's where we can't get stuck, because that fraudulent feeling is going to come. It's going to be there. So you're going to have those moments leading all the way up to the time where you are a success that you don't feel like one, that you're feeling like, why am I even doing this? I don't look like the person who should be doing this. People are looking at me doing this and I look stupid. And so you don't want, you know, people to know. And I'm not saying you need to go broadcast your goals to anybody, because I can, you know, vouch for the fact that there are haters. There are people that are going to be like, oh, I thought you said you were blah, blah, blah. So tell the right people, but be willing to have that accountability and tell somebody. So that actually leads me to the last thing. I know, I feel like I'm like preaching to you all today. So not meaning to come off preachy, because like I said, I'm preaching to myself as much as anybody. But the last one would be DIYing any and everything. Again, I am the ultimate DIYer. I want to do everything myself. I'm the person, like I was a homeschooling homemaker for a decade and a half. I DIY'd everything. You name it, I made it. Like whether it was like knitting something, sewing something, making my own like jewelry, soap, learning how to like do my own hair, do my own nails, making cleaners for the, like whatever it is, I DIY'd it. Like, trust me. Research things to death, all of that. But again, one of the things that I have discovered is that you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Like there is, some things are DIY, like they're fun to DIY and discover like, oh, I didn't realize how easy it was to make ketchup. You know, like, great, that's cool. Like grew my own tomatoes and went outside and like pureed them and strained them and did, you know, like did all the things. But at the same time, if I can go to Trader Joe's and like spend $1 or whatever on ketchup, like that's not backtracking. That's not like something's wrong with me when I, so like we can kind of get caught up in DIYing and be like, I'll paint my wall, I'll build that thing, I'll install the toilet. You know, my husband, we own a construction company as well. So this is something that we run into all the time with, even with homeowners, you know, of us having to, not like as if I do it, of our company having to come in and redo something that the homeowner tried to DIY themselves, or like some HGTV. Understanding that, like, you can know which parts to DIY. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So say, for instance, like if you hired somebody to like say it's your workouts, you hire somebody to create all of your workouts for the year. They get to know you, they get to understand your stuff, and you can go execute the workouts on your own. Like, you don't necessarily have to have like the trainer take you there all the time, unless you know that that's where you need accountability at, is like, okay, if somebody gives me a workout plan, I'm not going to do it, then that's where you get it at. Or working out at home, same thing. Like, you can work out at home and have things, but also like maybe somebody like, do you need to make every part of the workout on your own? Should you like get some help from that? It's no different than if you're doing a home improvement project. When should you hire a painter? When should you paint it yourself? Typically, when we're DIYing something, we want to take shortcuts. So a big example for this for me in like a non-fitness area was in painting. I never understood why we would ever hire a professional painter. I'm like, it's a can, it's paint, you roll it, you're like, what's the big deal? You know, and then as I try to get like better, I'm like, okay, you prime it and then you roll it. The first time that we ever had a professional painter come in our house, I was blown away. First of all, it took him like 10 times longer than I was taking, because I would just be like, look, like, let's get it done. And it looked so completely different. Does that mean everybody needs to hire a painter? No, but know that there's a big difference between somebody who's professionally trained to do something and you watching one YouTube video or researching and Googling things and doing it on your own. So sometimes you're going to do things and you're going to get help on parts of it, and then you're going to execute those parts by yourself. So just having the like, I got this mindset, and assuming that you can, just because you can and should do something 100% without any help, even if it's something that you know very little about, that is where you should kind of like start. That should be your red flag. If you want to do that for everything, like typically, even with DIY things, you should be looking at where can I get help or accountability if this is something that I do want. So like I said, if you're DIYing everything, then you're probably not setting up accountability to take action on what you do know, you know, or you're an analysis paralysis because you're trying to continually gather information, or you are taking action and it's like imperfect action, but also incorrect action. Because I'm all about imperfect action, but incorrect action, it's fine if you're willing to learn from it, but it's not fine if you're just going to keep doing it because you're just like, oh, it's fine, this is just what I'm doing, it's okay. So the main reason why you want to beware when you're DIYing everything is because that's not valuing your own time and your own priorities. So like if I decide that I want to knit a sweater because it's fun and relaxing for me, that's a big difference than knitting a sweater because I'm like gonna die of cold, like because I need that sweater. So like it's one thing to do something for fun. It's another thing to have a lot relying on it, especially if there's other things that you want to do. So if you're someone who like, you just want to be able to just like pick up a hobby and do it whenever and actually find pleasure in doing it and be able to set it back down afterwards, that's a great reason to DIY. DIYing something that's not super high stakes is totally fine, because a lot of times those are the things that like enhance us. They like get our brains working. They help us to like really like activate parts of our brain by learning something new. So in that instance, it's a good thing. But if you're putting DIYing something that's not that important to you or that has a high stake at hand above your own priorities and time, you're underestimating the amount of time that's passing while you're experimenting, trying to figure that thing out. So, you know, like, yeah, if you're just like painting a room in your house, it's not a big deal, nobody's gonna see it, it's a fun activity that you're doing with your kid, that's one thing. But if you're like going to paint somebody else's house, or you're deciding to paint the whole house, you know, and you know, there's other things that you could be doing. Like maybe it's not like you're yelling at the kids to get out of your way while you do it instead of actually spending time with them, then that's when you should start reconsidering things. So when it comes to DIY dieters, that's something too. Like there's a lot of time that's passing while people are experimenting and trying to figure stuff out, or while they're like not getting the accountability for the things that they need. So that's why a lot of us end up dabbling, because of the fact that we're spending all of our time like researching, lurking, like maybe that thing will work for me and maybe that thing will work for me. Like just speak up and ask, or just like hire somebody for a month to help you work through it. Like something like that. It doesn't mean that you're not doing that, like other parts of it by yourself. Just know which parts to DIY versus which parts to get help. DIYers that refuse to get help are typically hindering themselves. Most people, like I said, are not going to give themselves enough accountability during the times where it's just like, I just can't do this. And I know a lot of us, like if you're a DIYer and if you're anything like me, you're like, I'm harder on myself than anybody ever could be. And in a lot of ways, that is true as far as being hard on myself. That does not mean that I'm going to hold myself accountable to do the ish that I should be doing when I don't want to do it. Like that's willpower, and we only have so much of it. So if I got a lot of other things going on, it can start getting really easy to say that I'm giving myself grace or use all of these reasons for why I shouldn't do that thing. And those can compound into weeks, months, years of just not stepping up to the plate and doing what I said that I was going to do. So if that happens to you, then that's something that I would tell you to evaluate is, sometimes DIY costs you more than just getting help, whether it's more as far as like expenses, you know what I mean? Like I said, like, I love to knit, but if I'm being honest, buying the yarn to knit the sweaters costs way more than me just going to buy the sweater, or blanket or whatever it is. So in some instances, it's actual like monetary, wastefulness, or not wastefulness, but like it costs more literally, but also it could be costing you your time. Like I said, if you spend 3 years trying to figure out like your perfectly periodized workout plan, when you could have like literally hired somebody, paid them one time to create the plan for you that you could work all year, why wouldn't you do that? Like, unless you are trying to become a personal trainer and you really need to know all the ins and outs of that thing, you are not valuing your time. You are not valuing, the things that you want in life, or putting your priorities where they should be, because you're underestimating the amount of time that's passing. And then what's happened is that you keep spending that extra time instead of doing things that you actually would love to do. Maybe a DIY project that you actually love. You're wasting time doing DIY projects that you don't necessarily need to DIY. So if you're spending your Sunday planning out your meals when you could be, whatever, baking cupcakes with your kid or going on that walk or doing something like that, and maybe you could have just hired somebody else to do it or get a meal planning service, or maybe you're remodeling your house. Like, DIYing and getting help can happen at different phases. Remember, we're not getting tied down to any one phase and way of doing things. So you could DIY certain parts. You can DIY, or hire help for certain times of your year or your life or whatever that are maybe less conducive to DIY. So like if you have a newborn baby or a new job, or you have a bunch of kids that are all in sports, or you're working on a big project at work, or you're like renovating your house, things like that. Like maybe those are the times to get a meal prep service, or order your groceries and have them delivered to you instead of going out to get them. You are worth the $5 or whatever that the delivery costs. Like, I know for a lot of us, if you were raised like me, that's like, that hurts to think of somebody else doing something that you could do. And this is a conversation that I've had with my level up coaching group, where they're like, I don't want somebody else picking out my whatever fruit or meat or whatever it is. But why? Why not? Like, really ask yourself, why not? Like, is it just a like on principle thing when there is something else that you could be doing? Like, maybe you could go and have some time to like paint because that's what you love doing, or something like that, while somebody else brings the thing. Like, you are worth that. It's okay. Like Candy says, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. And especially women, the reason why I'm driving this home is because a lot of us are in denial about this. And the people that you typically look up to that seem like they got it all together, they have help and they ain't telling you about it. So you're looking at them and you're thinking like, oh my gosh, they're so amazing and they're doing all this stuff and I should be able to do it too. Or, my mom was able to do all these things, so therefore I'm going to do them. And I'm going to do all this other stuff that my mom didn't do too. Like maybe the stuff that your mom didn't do is like what actually tugs at your heart. Maybe the stuff that you're doing that's really important to you, somebody else can do the other things, whether it's teaching your kids to do them, whether it's hiring someone to do them, whether it's deciding not to do them at all. It's okay. Don't let, like I said, parental or peer or societal pressures, tell you that you need to be doing more than you already are. If you need to DIY it, if whatever the struggle is real, you ain't got the money, I get it. But at the same time, is DIYing it stopping you from making the money? Those are the kind of questions that you have to ask yourself. And I know this is like part diet, part life, because like I said, you can't compartmentalize them. That mentality has a crossover into your life. The way that you're showing up for whatever these physique goals that you're setting or not setting or denying or downplaying is probably how you're showing up in life. You're downplaying your real goals. You're denying that you have those goals. You are, not asking for help when you need it. So DIY where it counts and where it's an actual high priority for your life, for your values, not because of mom guilt, not because of social media guilt, not because of parental or cultural guilt. I get it. A lot of us had a lot less when we were younger. And so sometimes it feels like it's wrong or like, our ancestors are going to come out of their graves if we hire somebody to do something. But if there is something that is tugging on you, or if there is a goal that you're trying to get and DIYing something is getting in the way of that goal, it's time to ask better questions. And like, is there a way that I can do this with a little less stress? Like, we want the quick fix to come in our diets or in us reaching our goal, when maybe the quick fix that we need to be leaning into is like, where can I find convenience somewhere else? Because this thing is going to be a long haul and it's going to take me a little bit longer. So I need to free up some space to be able to focus on the behaviors that I need to execute from it. So again, not going to harp on anymore. Just know that there's no pride, or there should not be any pride, in running yourself ragged to DIY 100% everything in your life. Even if you are a stay-at-home homeschooling mom, like, I get it. But if the stress from everything that you're doing is sabotaging the results of what you really want, and you're choosing not to downplay, you're choosing not to deny what you really want, if it's costing you more in the long run and it's eating up the precious time that you could be doing the stuff that actually matters to you, it's probably not worth DIYing, or you shouldn't be DIYing it 100%. So hopefully that helped some of you guys. Again, DIY dieters, I love you. I am one of you. Although I've stepped into accountability in my life. So I have taken the lessons that I've shared with you here and have been executing them in my life, but I also keep them on replay because I want to always know what it is like that I want, and know if I am stopping myself or getting in my own way from doing it by being a prideful DIY dieter. So thank you so much for staying with me, and thank you guys who have been here for the ride for this whole time. I think it was almost an hour. You guys rock. Thank you everybody for joining. I will talk to you later.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode, and make sure you keep in touch. So whether that's through DMs or email, I would love to know what you felt about this episode, or if you have topics that you'd like me to cover in future episodes. You can DM me on Facebook at EM2WL, or over on Instagram at eatmore2wayless, or via email at info@eatmoretoway-less.com. If you're completely new to the Eat More to Weigh Less process, you can also grab our quick start guide at eatmoretoway-less.com/start. See you next time.